And if they sit there and ask questions, like my mother, it was a social event. She would call me and say, honey, I need to go see, his name was Dr. Aquino. He was this Latin guy that was good looking and looked like Perry Como. And so she would say, I need to go see Dr. Aquino. She had diabetes, and she would say, my neuropathy's so bad. Well, I'd make the appointment, I'd drive to Houston, take her to the doctor, and he would say, Miss Louise, I understand that your feet are hurting. Oh no, doctor, I'm just fine. How are you? It was almost like a flirt thing going on. It was a social event. It got her out of the house. And she liked to go to the doctor. A lot of seniors do. Some don't. Some, it's like pulling teeth to get them to go. But some, especially if they have a relationship with the doctor and it's a doctor they like, they want to go. So she could fool him. But she didn't have dementia at the time. But a person with dementia can certainly fool that doctor. So automatic speech, the second thing that we have on the right side of the brain, which is a wonderful gift, is rhythm. Rhythm, everybody's born with rhythm. Anybody disagree with me? If you're breathing and your heart's beating, you got rhythm. So everybody's born with rhythm. Rhythm can be poetry, it can be prayer. Prayer is rhythmic. It can be song. And music is our best tool. We can use it for anything. I can't tell you how many times I sang somebody into the shower.
Every day I sing to the shower.
Yeah, you can get somebody to do something by singing with them. Rhythm is so important because it goes all the way back to the beginning of time. There was a guy that was on Gordon Ramsay, and most chefs hate to cook eggs because they can't get them right. And he did the perfect poached egg. They were doing eggs Benedict. And Gordon Ramsay said, how did you do that? I've never had a more perfect poached egg. Now, I haven't tried this, so I don't know. And the guy, he said, Amazing Grace. He said, my grandmother would sing Amazing Grace. He was raised by his grandmother. And when she reached the second verse, she'd take the egg out. That happened in slave kitchens. People sang to get their food right. It happened in millennium. It's happened for thousands of years. Have you ever walked in with a really old person in the kitchen and they're humming or singing? They don't know it, but they're timing it. So I had a resident, well, it wasn't my resident, but I was training a group down in Dripping Springs, and there was a lady that was had been a Broadway director. And we tried rhythm. We tried singing in the rain with her. And she got really into it. And she went on into the shower, and they turned on the shower. If you've ever seen Singing in the Rain, there's some kicking of the water. And bless her heart, she had bass, and she had been there, and she smelled like a goat. So that was one way to get her into the shower. So I just said, every time you shower, do it at the end of your shift and bring a change of clothes.
Right.
You know, if that's the way to do it, that's the way to do it. You can sing somebody through it. If you can't sing, you can hum on key. You can't sing on key, you can hum. People don't hum off key usually. If they do, they're like Lucille Ball used to do. So that is one of our gifts. Now the worst one, or the last one, which really isn't so much of a gift, is every wrong word that you should never say in public comes out. How many of you are Sunday school teachers or have been? You're going to be the cussers. Yeah, because a lot of times it's something totally opposite of what you are will happen. But if I remember, the left side of the brain is actually comprehension and being able to form speech. If I can't say what I really need, I'm going to use the words I have. And they've been locked away on the right side of my brain. So if I can't tell you, get away from me, you're bothering me. I can't tell you how upsetting it is to a daughter to be called the B word.
Yep.
Because Mama never said that. They will let loose with curse words that you didn't think they would know. But those words have been around longer than you and me. So yes, they did learn it. So, those can come out. Now, remember I talked about the amygdala? If I'm not pushing or I'm shoving, I may cuss you. I can't get the right words out, so I'm going to use the words I've got. And I'm not pleased, so I'm going to use it. Any questions?
What do you do in response to that?
You try to be a detective and figure out exactly what they're telling you. And you don't respond negatively to it. You don't say, oh, Mom, you can't cuss me. That's horrible. You've never done that before. Because she may come back and say, honey, I didn't cuss you.
Right. Yeah.
So we don't really respond to it. If we let it just kind of fly and then ask those questions, who, what, where, when, how. Now, did you need help with changing, what's going on? They may be grabbing and you can tell by that, but be a detective. If you're a detective and you figure out what their needs are, usually those cuss words come when there are unmet needs. So I got off script. That's not in your stuff, but I thought it was good for you to hear it.
My husband, we had a situation where, as far as sexual comments are concerned,
Oh, yeah.
we had a person in the choir, and she was younger, and she had Pick's disease.
Oh, yeah.
And she had a thing for my husband. And we were told, whatever she does or whatever she says, don't think anything about it.
Well, you can still be human and think something of it.
That sticks with them, and that's part of.
With that third gift, I'm glad you brought that up, with the dirty words, we also will have racial slurs, which can really be difficult for caregivers in a facility, because it's hard to not take that personally. So racial slurs may happen, sex talk may happen. It may start out as easy as, you sure look pretty in that. Then it becomes, you sure look pretty in that. We need to watch for that. I had a caregiver that came to me. We had a colonel that lived in our facility. And she said, every time I try to give the colonel a bath, he grabs me. The colonel loved her, and she loved him. She was a great caregiver. And I said, well, let me stand outside and listen. Let's see how this goes. And she goes into the bathroom with him, turns on the shower, and she goes, okay, Colonel, let's get your clothes off and get in the shower. She was inviting herself into a very intimate situation. So he heard, And the same thing went over when she was getting ready for bed. Colonel, let's get your clothes off and get in bed. So he heard what he heard. And so we need to understand what we say is literal. What we say, they take literally. But sex talk can happen. And it can be really, it can really hurt a family. And it's up to, if they're in a facility, it's up to the facility to understand and talk to both families. Because sometimes it goes beyond talk. And acts actually happen. So they have to be in good communication with both families on this. And it could end up with somebody needing to move. If they're targeting someone, it may not be, there's one thing when two people have about the same level of dementia and they're not confusing that person for someone else, there's something about that is kind of okay. But when you think about it with dementia, there's really no such thing as consent. So if they're targeting somebody that has a little more dementia or a different dementia, we got to look at that, look at it carefully. That answer? Okay. So insufficient problem-solving ability to cope with changes or disruption. Moving to a new environment. They cannot get that. It's really, really difficult. Changes in environment are tough anyway for anyone. But a person with dementia, no. Don't ever tell me that I live here. Don't ever say that. If I'm saying, I want to go home, I want to go home. Well, Mom, you're going to stay here tonight. We have a room fixed up for you. And you're going to be here tonight, but I'll be back tomorrow. I'll be back is good. Goodbye is not. Goodbye means I don't know when I'm going to see you. I'll be back, or I'll see you later. Those are easy ways to let somebody go. So behavioral change is becoming more withdrawn or distant. We talked about that in social settings. Becoming suspicious, not only accusing someone of stealing, but accusing them of infidelity. If it's a care partner and they live at home, and they have to go to the store, so they leave the person alone, they come back, who is she? Who are you seeing? Because you've been gone for hours. I know there's somebody. And it can become a real issue in a situation, in an apartment situation. Becoming more fearful or anxious, especially in the absence of a caregiver. Don't go, don't leave me. Because there's a fear that when you leave me, then I'm alone. And the truth is, I'm not necessarily. But I'm fearful of you being out of my sight. Hoarding unnecessary objects. People will keep things. It can be generational too. If they are a child of the Depression or a child of World War II when things were rationed, there are things that they feel like they have to have. I'd say the most common thing that people have hoarded in places I've worked has been toilet paper. They would ask for it over and over because of all things you don't want to run out of. And they may have 30 rolls in their closet. So if I ran out, I knew where to go get it. But, yeah, toilet paper seems to be the thing everybody wants the most of. But they'll tend to hoard things. Stacks of magazines that may have one-page dog-eared because it had a recipe. Rather than tearing that recipe out, I keep the whole magazine. They're stacked up. Are some of you doing that?
Yeah.
Tear that page out.
I can write it down now.
Yeah, write it on your recipe card.
I can't find it again.
Yeah, you forget why you had it. I used to have a catering business, and I would take Bon Appetit, and I would do that, and then it's like, I didn't know which recipes I was looking at.
Yeah.
Broken rubber bands, that's
Broken rubber bands, well, that could be dangerous
totally
too.
unusable.
That could be dangerous because there's a point with dementia where people will become very tactile and they may put things in their mouth. So broken rubber bands are kind of a scary thought. Artificial fruit can be scary, especially artificial grapes because they pull off and you can swallow them. Increased irritability or angry outbursts can happen. Depression, loss of energy, tearfulness, and general apathy. A person with dementia knows something's wrong. They're grieving the same time you're grieving. They know that something's wrong. They're grieving the losses. They're going to be depressed. They're going to be apathetic. So there's a reason for it. They know what's happening. Any questions?
Do they oftentimes, though, look at other people and go, well, I'm not as bad as them.
Yeah,
so
why
did you
am I
bring me
here?
Yeah,
Look at
boy.
these people.
Uh-huh.
And that's an opportunity, if they're not as bad as them, to maybe get them to help with them.
Yeah.
And give them some purpose.
Yeah.
This I can go through, but it'll take us a while. This is in your slides, but the changes by stage and memory. Early stage need reminders. Middle stage may not recognize a loved one. Or they may see you and you look a lot like their sister or their mother and they think you're their sister. Or their son. Or their brother. They may not recognize themselves in a mirror in late stage. And I've had that happen. When they would look at the person in the mirror and they would see their mother. Or they would see their sister. Or it was just a total stranger that happened to be doing the same thing they were doing and talking the same way they talked. Language, word finding problems early on, inventing new words and repeating phrases in the middle stage, can't communicate using words in late stage. Executive function, tell me when I have to stop. Am I doing okay? Because we started late.
Yeah.
Executive function, complex tasks require supervision. They may need coaching and prompting to do middle stage. In late stage, activities must be done for them. In other words, care tasks need to all be done for them. Navigation, early they may get lost driving home. Middle stage, they may get lost in their own home. Late stage, they're mostly bed-bound or chair-bound. Not always. People with dementia can retain ability late into it. They can be walking and talking and be late stages, if you want to call them stages. Self-care, they need help organizing and managing meds early on. Middle stage, they may have difficulty bathing, grooming, maintaining hygiene, and they may start to have accidents. Late stage, just difficulty eating and swallowing. As somebody goes to later stages, we usually need to have a swallowing study. Physiospatial problems with depth perception early on. Middle stage, they may have trouble distinguishing colors and texture, and I would say heat from cold too. Late stage, they don't recognize or relate to objects. And cognitive skills, mood and personality, early on they're more easily frustrated than before. They get angry about what's going on. In mid-stage, they may become suspicious and paranoid, and putting it off on somebody else that's doing that to me. Late stage, the mood is at the mercy of environmental factors. Too much light, too little light, too cold, too hot, all of that can change. Risk factors, advancing age, genetic predisposition. I talked a little about the APOE4, and that's less than 10% of cases. Gender and ethnicity, more women have Alzheimer's than men. See some scared faces.
Well, and there was an article that just came out like recently about they're thinking that it may have something to do with pregnancy hormones and.
It could be
all of
hormonal,
that.
but
They've been
most
looking at
likely
that.
it's because you outlive us.
Well, yeah, but they're saying that's been thinking it's because we outlive men, but in fact, there may be more of a hormonal component than that,
Could
that
be.
explains all of that.
Hormonal changes cause a lot of confusion. So, on ethnicity, Hispanic and African American populations tend to have a greater risk of Alzheimer's. It's because there's a greater risk of heart disease and diabetes. So diabetes, it's considered a risk factor. Head injury,
There you go.
lifestyle. If you lead a sedentary lifestyle and you sit there and eat potato chips all the time, yeah, you probably are at greater risk. Partially because you're socially not active. Heart disease, high blood pressure, diabetes, and stroke can all be risk factors. So treatments, let's talk about medication. Cholinesterase inhibitors. Some of you may have heard of donepezil or Aricept. Erostigmine, I can't say that well, but it's Exelon, which also comes in a patch. Now, the thing with the cholinesterase inhibitors, they used to think that they slowed the progression. They can't say that anymore. Medications we have now may improve cognition, the operative word is may, in some people for a short period of time. I've heard that they may work on 30% or less of the people. Now that's not really bad odds though. All medication has to be trial and error in that sense. But what we don't realize, and what a lot of our regular doctors don't realize, is it's only effective for a short period of time. Now, if somebody is very advanced in age, we may want to give some consideration to the side effects. It's mostly gastric. It can cause really terrible gastric issues. So if the side effects are worse than the possible effect, we need to weigh that as a family. Now the other one, glutamate regulator for moderate to severe, is memantine or Namenda. Now your glutamates are, they are expensive, yeah. It actually is what sends the signals through the brain, so it's a neuroreceptor. And they're most effective in early stages. You notice that the glutamate regulator are for moderate to severe. In Europe, it's approved for early stage. In the U.S., it's approved for mid to late stage. Go figure. And it's been used a lot more in Europe anyway. So the best thing we can do is family education, counseling, and planning. You're here. Environmental modifications. Creative art therapies. People with dementia sometimes can really shine. You know, especially frontotemporal dementia. I've seen some of them become really great artists, and they never touched anything. So they can really shine. It gives them an opportunity to express what they can't express in words. Structuring the day is really important. People are more cognitive in the beginning of the day. So when it comes to activities or physical activity or cognitive, we need to look at doing that earlier in the day. But we need to structure the day. If they take a nap, let's have a certain time that they take naps and that we get them up. And I've heard that naps are good right after lunch because they can, not right after because you can aspirate, but shortly after lunch because the brain just needs to rest a bit. And it can help sometimes with sundown.
Question,
Yes.
how effective are some of those things like Aricept? Is there any downside to taking those things? or-
It depends on the person, and the biggest downside is gastric. It can cause really bad stomach upset with some people. Some people it just doesn't work at all. So that's a conversation to be had as a family and with your physician, whether or not it's going to be actually beneficial to try. Some people do great. They'll take Aricept or Namenda, and cognitively they have a real big bounce up for a time, for a while. So behavior modification techniques, one-on-one time with a person can really help them, but that also can include medication, which I hate to admit, but medication is something we got to be careful of. So how we help, this is Alzheimer's Texas. We have an information and referral line 24/7. Education and training for individuals, caregiver, family members, and professionals, that's me. Care consultations, we can do them by phone because you guys don't live near Austin. But if you need a consultation on your family, you'll have one with me. And you just have to call our office to set up a time. Usually they're on Tuesdays. Monthly caregiver support groups. I also want to include respite groups, which there's one here. Early stage support programs, we have some really great groups for early stage, but they are held at our office. Research advancement, we support research. We partner a lot with the Darrell Royal Foundation, and so we pour a lot of money into research, or as much as we can. Advocacy, once a year we go to the Capitol and we camp out in the senators and congressmen's offices until we're seen. If any of you that are interested in signing up for advocacy or anything, write it on the sign-in sheet, because we'd love to have you. Community respite program development, which you do have one here. Here are what we have here. We have a support group in Bastrop. Apparently, do we have a support group in Smithville?
Not that we know
You want to start one?
of. I don't know. We'll talk about it.
Y'all think about it, yeah, because we'll send the kid out to you, because we probably need one here. So respite program, 4 hours of free care. In Bastrop, it's on Tuesdays from 10 to 2. Here, it's on Thursdays from 10 to 2. New Hope respite program. And if you want to volunteer with that, talk to Norman and he can direct you.
Brenda.
Talk to Brenda.
Brenda.
Talk to Brenda, because she can help you with figuring out how you can help. So we are about to have our Bastrop Fayette County Alzheimer's Walk. It will be on October 27th, and there are invitations back there to the kickoff party. It's at the Smithville Indoor Rec Center. I'm sure you guys know where that is, and I have no idea. So you can register today at our website, txalz.org/walk. And it's on your slides too, so you'll have it. So it's free to walk, or if you raise or give $50, you get a really nifty t-shirt. I usually wear the one, but I'm tired of wearing last year's shirt. One thing, it's yellow, and I look like a giant pregnant banana.
It is yellow.
So if you have any questions or you'd like a consultation, please call us. Now, any questions? Yes, sir.
Typical diagnosis, if one of your family has these symptoms, do you go to your family physician and he would recommend maybe further testing?
Hopefully he'll recommend that.
Okay.
Some doctors, it stops there. Some doctors, they'll do one of two short tests. They'll do a test that's called the mini mental state exam. which most people that work with Alzheimer's and dementia are not that nuts about, because it's more about cognition, and it's not real fair. Count backwards from 100 by sevens.
By 7.
Yeah.
I'm going to read you a story that's 2 paragraphs long, and then you come back and tell me everything you remember. I mean, it's really difficult. It doesn't take into consideration how educated you are, how smart you are. There are people that can breeze through it, and they're pretty advanced. So there's that one, and there's also a test called the SLUMS test, the St. Louis University Mental State Exam. The SLUMS test is a little more fair than that. However, it does have a couple of simple math problems that can really stop some people. It has an interesting component that I love. It's called the animal fluency test. They'll time you for a minute and sit in front of you and just make hash marks keeping up with it. Name as many animals as you can before the timer goes off. They don't tell you you have a minute. So you start naming animals. If you're over 65, you should get 14 or more, or less. No, it's 14, I think. If you're under 65, you should get 18 or more. I had a guy say, I got 42. I'm like, you smart aleck. but yeah, and that's a good way to test and come up with the person's baseline. And it can be done like an activity. You can do that and say, let's play a game. Let's do this. And you can ask me. Some differences in men and women. Women will be more likely to categorize. Women will be more likely to name all household animals than all farm animals, or they'll do them by alphabet. They'll name all the animals with an A, all the animals with an D. But men don't do that. We're all over the place. Women are more likely to scan things. If you ask a woman, this is not 100%, but if you ask her to go to the refrigerator and get the cream, she's going to scan. There it is. You ask a man to go to the same refrigerator, and he's going to be, honey, I can't find it. It's right in front of me. So women tend to scan things and tend to categorize things. It's kind of an interesting thing.
That also works if you say it's on the second shelf, on the left, in the back.
In a green bottle with a green
Yeah,
lid.
can't find it.
Is it second from the bottom or second?
Yeah, that's right.
When he says which.
Can you tell I go through that all the time?
When he says which refrigerator.
So those are the tests that the primary care doctor tend to do. Now that test should tell them whether or not you need to go further. And most doctors, well, I wish most doctors would refer you then to a neurologist for further testing. Some don't. Some doctors stop there and say, oh, I'm going to prescribe Aricept. And they may not really know the drug that well, but they know what the pharmaceutical rep has told them, so they're going to prescribe it. But I'm not slamming doctors, but they some doctors, it stops there. And it probably does, especially in a smaller town like this, where you may not have access to a lot of neurologists unless you go to to Austin or Houston or somewhere else. Because I don't know, your little hospital may not have it. They may have one neurologist. And if he does do this hospital, it probably travels. So the doctors may not feel that they have that access. But a neurologist is who will initiate further testing. Yes.
The doctor I use, he does some of his tests like what you described, or name words that start with F, and one of his things is to get a baseline. So he does it this year, he does it next year, he does it year after year.
Every 6 months to a year.
you see
we
progression.
changes.
Yes,
So
see a
they'll
progression.
tend to do it over and over. But yeah, hopefully they'll direct you to another doctor or say, I think you need to see a neurologist. But in a smaller, more intimate town like this, the doctor may not have options and may just prescribe. Which, I mean, certainly that's a conversation to be held between the family and the doctor. They may be very astute. They may understand these drugs well. Some do, especially if they deal with a lot of geriatrics. They probably do, to some degree. Any other questions? Wow, I must be good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I do have one question. Has there been any research between, I say, excessive anesthesia Some people would have to have.
Anesthesia may cause dementia, it may exacerbate it and make it start. A person that has dementia certainly doesn't do well having anesthesia, especially multiple times or for long periods of time. It can make things a lot worse. There's something to be said also for chemo. You know, chemo can cause some issues as well.
It's a restaurant anyway.
Yes.
So a lot of times with Alzheimer's patients, their body, the brain was stopping their body, so it does cause a death ultimately. How is it for dementia? It's not, it doesn't go that far.
Well, there are over 80 known dementias, and like I said, if some are multiple dementias, yes, it could go all the way to the end. Most dementias, the same thing can happen, but not necessarily. If you have Lewy body, you may also have Parkinson's or another condition. You know, a lot of times we're going to see another condition take someone before they reach that point. But some people do go all the way to the end. And we need to get hospice involved earlier. You know, when the doctor says it's okay, then we do it, because they can be a tremendous support for you as a family. You'll have a social worker, a nurse, a doctor that's on call, a chaplain. You have all of those things at your disposal, and they really can help a family.
Well, one issue we're having, my mother has, that's 4 girls, and my baby sister, she lives with Pamela, but it's not fair that, you know, Pammy has to take, you know, and Tanya's living with me now, so that house so much, that it's just to one person taking care of her all the time. So I retired like a year early to help, and then my other 2 sisters come up and help. Well, I live in Woodville, so our plan was me to come get her and take her to my home for a couple weeks a month. Well, I did that 2 or 3 times, and she just got worse and worse and worse.
It's that changing environment.
We didn't know that at the time, and I mean, it got like, she would try to jump out the car. I mean, she was thinking I was going to put her in front and kill her. I mean, that was the last time that I took her out. So now Pammy, we keep her here with Pammy and Tanya, but that's just, that wasn't our plan.
There will always be one
Our
that kind of
plan was
has
so
to
we could
take.
take her and just each of us spend time with her, but the more, we didn't know the environmental part of it was the main issue.
And they can still spend time, but family members and friends don't know you need help if you don't ask.
Well, we've come here now, and
Okay.
we don't move her, but that wasn't our plan. We wanted to take her to our homes, you know, and give Cammie, because, you know, Cammie has a baby and just so busy, just give her a break, you know. It didn't work out like that at all. And this is the first dementia we've had in any of our family. I mean, we've never been around it, and we had no idea that moving her would be such an issue. Once I got her to my house, she was fine. It was the trip that just, I mean, we was afraid she was going to go in shock. I mean, it was just very, at a point we had to
That's
take her to the
traumatic.
hospital, you know. Yeah.
That's traumatic. The
Yeah.
idea, I mean, she may think you're taking her to put her away somewhere.
She did, she was used to doing that, but she's fine if she stays here now at home, and we just come and do our time here. But we sure would have liked that, taking her to our homes, so the other part of the family could visit,
Yeah.
because we all live all.
We sure are glad y'all share her with us on Thursdays.
Yeah. This is the best thing that, I wish it could be more than one day a week.
Yeah.
Because she fights, she don't want to come up here. She,
Oh, I know.
Yeah, she can.
That's pretty typical.
like you said, Tanya sings her all the way here.
And once she gets her, she's fine.
But here she's fine,
They
because
have a
she's
great
always
time,
been the
yeah.
game person and bingo and all, her whole life. She's the one who initiated the card games and played with the grandkids and
She's
stuff.
good.
So once she's here, she's having a blast.
Yeah.
But
Get her here.
it sure helps her whole mood for the rest of the day. She's like real happy.
I'm
I
at
wish we
respite
could get it.
in Bastrop, so I'll bring her on Tuesdays from 10 to 2. Methodist Church in Bastrop.
Yeah, you can have 2 days.
It
a
really
week.
helped her here
Yeah.
because Tammy's just a block up on the bakery,
Yeah.
on Main
In
Street.
respect to this, a lot of times they'll come in and they'll say, oh my God, they're in such a bad mood. You know, they're very, very difficult this morning. And it's like night and day here.
Yeah.
It's so amazing.
Same thing happens in a facility. What you see and what really goes on are 2 different things.
Thank
Oh,
you.
yeah.
When you're there with them, take me home, I don't
Yes.
want to be here.
Yes.
Then you leave and they have a great time.
Yeah.
They do, it's hot, they make sure, they tell her, like, see you in a little while, or something that
Yeah.
relaxes her. But I wish Smithville could do more than one day a week.
And the important thing of it is people at the very beginning, families, do not want to admit to the problem, and they keep them kind of to themselves. And that is wrong, because they need to have a social outlet. And the respite programs are for beginning and middle stages of dementia and Alzheimer's. And then if they wait too long, then there's a problem. Because they come here, they're treated no differently than any other person. They're not looked at queer, you know, and it's just a totally different outlook. And I had one person come and observe, and he said to me, I can't believe the difference. And I said, what difference? He said, well, they'll come in here, and he said, and almost every one of them, and he said, they have a face down to here, and when they see where they are, he said, they're all smiles.
Mother's very social.
But people, I don't know how we get to people to get rid of that attitude and that idea.
Well, part of the problem is people who have someone with dementia grieve.
Right.
Person with dementia grieves too. If you grieve the losses, if you know the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross stages of grief, the first stage is denial and isolation.
Right. That's it.
So that's exactly what they're doing, and you know, it's not until they begin to experience some of the other, like depression is next, then anger, then bargaining, the whole bargain. If you don't know what I mean by that, it's like, oh God, if I could just take this from them, I'll go to church every day. You know, bargaining happens before acceptance happens, and unfortunately, it takes some level of acceptance to be able to bring someone.
And see, at that point, it works, because to participate in a respite, they, number one, have to be able, they are never left alone from the time they come through the door. Because always, sometimes from night to the next morning, they can become roamers and just take off. They are not supposed to go to the bathroom alone. They are supposed to be taken to the bathroom. But they must be able to tend to themselves in the stall. Okay? They must be able, as I said, to feed themselves. But now Steve gave a very good,
That was
with the
great.
business of the
Yeah.
shoulder and everything. That's not an example you've used before.
And you can get someone started with assistance with eating. Now, the way that you cue someone, there are 3 things that you do. You give a visual cue, then a verbal cue, then you can touch. So if I was going to assist you with eating, it's time to eat. Come with me, and I take your hand that way, and we go and I pick up the fork. But it's not until I've done a visual and a verbal, then I can touch you.
Because we've had people say, oh, we can't get them to eat at home. We can't get them to eat.
They eat great.
Well, I want to tell you something. There's mostly empty plates that we put in the truck. Because they eat when they're here, and I think it's the social aspect of it that
Sometimes it's a
everybody.
matter of the diet you're giving them. They may be better with finger foods. Give them chicken tenders, give them fish sticks, give them things like that they can hold. Sometimes people do better with that, especially if they're one that will get up and walk. They may pick it up and walk with it. So sometimes it's the diet that we're feeding.
But the other thing that I found, and I addressed this to Christian, the policy book that Alzheimer's Texas puts out says that people in a wheelchair van do not qualify. And I said, Christian, I disagree with that. Because I said, I have mobility problems. I have to use a wheelchair. There's nothing else wrong with me. That means I'm discriminated against. And she hesitated at first.
Yeah, this is based on state regulations.
Right, and she said, well, I would say this to you, if they're in a wheelchair, she said, just so they can transfer from the wheelchair to the toilet, do it on a one-on-one basis. And if they can transfer from the
Without
wheelchair
assistance while
to the
they're going.
toilet or from the wheelchair to a chair, then they do qualify. But the way the policy was read to me was that,
Well, because the state thinks that a person in a wheelchair is less likely to be able to tend to themselves.
right,
So some residents don't necessarily follow you into the bathroom. So you may be taken to the bathroom and then door open and told.
yeah, they don't, when they're here, it's okay because you can't go outside.
Right.
To go, and we lock that door, all right? But some places, you come out of the bathroom, and that's what worries me, is, oh, do I go to the left, or do I go to the right, which is outside?
Right.
And the police departments here, and the police departments in Bastrop, do not participate in any kind of a program where they can wear a bracelet or anything. And so I feel very confident here, because I know they're not going to get it.
Well, Safe Return is a national program, so if you get the bracelet on them, it's just like any other medical condition. The police should be able to read the bracelet and then call Safe Return, and then you are the one that's listed and they'll get in touch with you. So they don't need to necessarily be that well versed on Safe Return. It's just the bracelets and the necklaces look like any other medical alert. So they're going to look at it. Yeah, so we have some information on that, so you can contact us, but it's through Life Alert. And someone that can't afford it, they actually have scholarships for it. I think it costs like $35 a year to be registered, so it's worthwhile.
It's kind of like medical alert, except it's a location.
It may be medical alert, it's one or the other. It may be medical alert that does it, you're right. I think it is. But yeah, we have information if you'll call our office. But even if the police and fire departments are not well versed in dementia, they'll see a medical alert bracelet and look at it. Because they don't want to do something to you that's going to cause you to go into anaphylactic shock, or if you have diabetes, they're going to look at it. And if it says Alzheimer's or dementia and has the phone number of where to call, they will participate to that degree. So it's worth having.
Well, that's good to know, because we had a
It's
person
medical,
here.
you're right.
We had a person here, got out in the middle of the night, walked 7 blocks, rang a doorbell. Fortunately, it was a good doorbell, and those people called the police, and the police came and took her home. They high-latched the doors and everything, so she couldn't get out. The daughter forgot one night to latch the door. She got out again, but went the other way and got out by 71.
Oh no.
And the police found her out on 71 in her pajamas with her 2 grocery bags packed. And when they brought her back, they said they were going to have to contact adult services if it happened again. And so it would be nice to know about that.
And they still may be obligated to contact adult
So
protective
they have
services.
now put her in, they realized they had to put her in a facility. But
Yeah,
she
but
was-
those bracelets, they look like any other medical alert bracelet, so they're gonna look at it. Same thing with the necklace, but the bracelet is more visible. And if it's a person that's reluctant to take it, wrap it up and give it to a grandchild to give it to them as a gift.
That's a good point.
You know, that they may accept it that way.
Couldn't there be some kind of education For the police department
We do have a program.
here?
And actually, I'm working on another program that's based on the positive approach that I showed you. So I'm working on that, but there is a program with Alzheimer's Texas where we'll come out and talk with them.
But who solicited, the police department or?
They need to ask, yeah.
Oh,
I
that's
mean, we
the-
have so many police and
drop.
sheriff's departments and everything that we can't really contact them all, but we do have a program.
But see now, like we've just had that happen twice, and there may be other instances that have happened right here. So it might be a right time to talk to somebody at the police department and say, would you be willing to have
And not
this
just them, all
workshop?
your first responders, police, fire, EMS, they all should understand.
Yeah,
Because especially like EMS, I can tell you how many times I've had somebody that broke a hip, and they come and they have them on the gurney, and the EMS will look over on top of them and say, now where do you hurt? And they'll say, oh, I don't hurt, I'm fine. Well, you had a fall. I didn't fall. You know, so unless they know what they're doing, they either get frustrated with the person or they take their word.
yeah.
So,
Does Fast Drop have, does their police department, have they had this
no.
training?
In fact, honestly, since I've been with Alzheimer's Texas, I haven't been requested to speak to any police or fire department.
Wow. Well, I will tell you, having been in politics here for 30 years, that I would go to the county judge, Paul Coffey, and get him to coordinate a countywide of the police departments and fire
Well,
departments.
it sounds like you know him, so.
Oh, yes.
So call him.
You would
But
be more than
that's
right.
where I think it should begin. Do it on a countywide basis, and then, because you have interaction with all of the different police
Yeah.
departments and fire departments.
And actually, they should have the brochures for the medical alert that they give to the family when they go out. If they're getting called on one of these calls, they need to be able to give it and say, look, you need to register them.
My son's a Harris County sheriff, and they just went through very extensive 6-week course on, they were all, they had, it was mandatory.
When I worked in facilities, I
Said you
actually,
learned so much that they had no clue.
I was actually called a couple of times at the facility, and they would tell me, I think one of your people got out. I did a head count, not any of mine, but it was somebody that had wandered off from a personal care home.
Yeah.
So
Well, he said now they're aware, like when they have to arrest somebody or something.
it looks like mental
they can
illness to them.
detect,
Oh,
okay,
yeah.
there's a problem here, you know.
Yeah, it can look like mental illness, especially if the person has a urinary tract infection or if they're sleep deprived. They can come across as somebody crazy.
Well, and when they're, especially if they're in that like kind of paranoid or, you know, between angry and paranoid and all of that. That's,
It's like when somebody
they're gonna
gets
read
lost
that as mental illness.
and a policeman's out there yelling their name. There's no way they're gonna raise their hand and say, here I am.
Especially in Houston, I mean, you automatically assume, okay, they're on drugs or something.
Yeah.
And now they detect, okay, that has nothing to do with it, there's really a problem. But they know the signs of the.
From my support group, I had a family that the man took off from Austin and told his wife she had married him 8 years before and he had dementia and she didn't know it. And she was in California visiting her sister, and he said, I'm going to go to Houston to see my cousin. And he disappeared. And they got a call finally. He was in Chicago driving the wrong way on a turnpike. And he had lucid enough moments to stop and fill up with gas.
Wow.
But he was sleep deprived because he drove straight through. And he was driving the wrong way. They threw out the spikes and stopped his car. And when he got out, he looked crazy. He got tased. And he was 84 years old and ended up in the hospital in Chicago because of it. So, yeah, they don't know how to react. I mean, he looked insane. He was sleep deprived. He got out of the car with his hands in the air and came at them. And he's lucky they didn't shoot him.
Yeah. And that's,
I think it's an interesting idea to follow through with Judge Poppy to do a program for the Judge Poppy idea. That'd be
Yeah.
good for
That's
someone
a
to do
great
that.
So if he could coordinate it, we'll come out.
Okay, thank you.
Well, Steve, thank you so much.
Thank you
This
for
has
having
been
me.
Very informative, thank you.
Thank-